If the hardliners keep losing and become weaker and weaker, can the so-called reformist moderates come into power and basically be more flexible to the Americans and negotiate peace agreements that would cause the Islamic Republic to continue? And again, guys, let's look at the most important people who are the so-called reformers. Is Hassan Rouhani is the most important one. Muhammad Khatami is one of them that is very important. Hassan Khomeini over here is an important one over here. And then Javad Zarif is an important so-called reformer. And Arakshi would be one of them as well. And Pezeshkian would be considered one of them as well. In fact, everybody within Pezeshkian's cabinet would be considered like that, right? So the most important one being Hassan Rouhani and Javad Zarif. And here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with the idea of pushing away the so-called hardliners and bringing into power the so-called reformers to to rule and help the Islamic Republic to continue in a way that the Americans and Israelis are okay with, but the Iranian people would have to suffer the Islamic Republic. The reason why that plan is really hard to work for these so-called reformers is that these people have zero, like close to zero support among the Iranian people. Like they're not just hated by the opposition, by the anti-regime Iranians, they're also hated by the pro-regime Iranians, right? So they're the most politically, like the most bankrupt when it comes to popular support among the Iranian people. They have no control over military. The IRGC hates them. They have very little economic power compared to the IRGC, but they are the most hated group in Iran. They're more hated than the hardliners because not even the regime supporters like them. So imagine if we have that situation. Imagine if we get Javad Zarif or Rouhani, we put them in charge, and the Americans were like, "Oh my God, these are lovely. They are accepting everything," because they would. Honestly, I think like people like Rouhani and Javad Zarif, they would go like, "Here's all the uranium, we will how about how about zero range for our missile, like they will give up all the missiles if they had to. They will say like bring all the international observers to make sure that we will never enrich uranium again. Like these people, like people like Hassan Rouhani and Javad Zarif, they're willing to go all the way if they could. The only reason why you see, for example, in Javad Zarif's article in Foreign Affairs, when he says like, oh, you have to allow us to enrich uranium a little bit, is because if he said anything else, he would have been killed by the pro regime people by now. Like you already saw that that article caused the pro regime people to call for his execution in the streets of Iran. So imagine if his article said 0% enrichment of uranium. But if he had his way, both of these people would have definitely given Americans and even Israelis whatever they wanted, right? But so let's go back to that hypothetical situation where the Americans and Israelis put them in charge. They were like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what we wanted. They're giving us everything we want. The Islamic Republic is not a threat anymore. So let's go home. Let's end the military operations." That is a very unstable situation because they have 0% support. Instead of if you leave Iran like that, you will have a double uprising. You will have an uprising of the more secular minded Iranian people because they're not going to tolerate that. They're going to be like, well, this is not Pahlavi. We want Pahlavi, right? So you're going to have a 95% uprising support of the more secular minded Iranian people, but you're also going to have the minority 5% support for the Islamic Republic. They're going to do an uprising as well because they hate them as well. They think that these are traitorous. They think these are Zionist spies. They genuinely think Zarif and Rouhani are Zionist spies. So they're not going to sit home and be like, okay, we agree with this. So how are they going to continue to maintain their control when we have a double uprising against them? Does that make sense?
What if Russia or China uses them as a proxy to ensure the survival of the regime? It's a
But
possibility.
how? But how are they going to force an entire, like you need like even if you
Because
want some tyranny, you need
they
some
could support the
support.
repression of the people, the blackout, news blackout of turn it into North Korea.
Under Hassan Rouhani and Zarif? Like
Well, temporarily,
you
temporarily
want
they
the
would
black
use that.
you want okay, so here's the thing. You want a North Korean suppression of pro regime people as well. Like
Yeah, they would
you
go
want
underground.
a suppression.
Well, they would
You
go
want you
underground because the US and the Israelis would pound them so hard that by the time that they're quieted down, and they have no
So
more missiles.
for this to work, you need Chinese, Russian, and American forces all coming to Iran and helped Rouhani and Zarif suppress 100% of the Iranian people.
How about the British or the
And
French?
they need to stay there because as
This is
soon
what
as
the
they
British and the
leave.
French want, though. This is what the British state and the French state want. Seriously, they would like this regime because
But okay, so are they okay? I don't even if they want that. Are they going to? Are the British and French going to send their army into Iran to suppress 100% of the Iranian people,
well, it seems like
including the anti-regime people and pro-regime people?
I
It's
don't know.
just not. It's not stable. It's not like
Okay.
this is such an unstable situation that it has to collapse into one of these two situations, right? If you manage to create an Iran or have an Iran where these so-called reformers are in charge right now, this is so unstable that it would either have to collapse to the Iranian people, like the 95% Iranian, secular-minded Iranians, to eventually kick these people out and bring Pahlavi into power, or we will go collapse back to the 5% pro-regime people. Like once the Americans leave, they manage to win, kick the reformers out, and they will come back in power.
Well, I'm thinking that
You're not going to maintain that. You're not going to be able to continue keeping people like Rouhani and Zarif in power. It's
right.
just not
I
stable.
would see them as like a ploy to get Israelis and Americans to back off. Okay, give time to rebuild, reform, and then just and then suppress the hell out of the Iranians, and then turn it into like a news blackout, internet blackout, just like a state that's just completely off the grid.
I see if Rouhani and Zarif come to power, I think that would be you're going to have a temporary period where because Rouhani and Zarif are to be able to show to the world that we're now reformed. We're going to have a window of opportunity for not suppressing the Iranian people to the level that we saw early January. And I think if they are in power, we're going to see a mass as soon as the Americans and Israelis leave, we're going to see a mass uprising like we've never seen before, even bigger than we saw in early January. And it would be the end of them. It would be the Iranian people will. I think this will be just a temporary phase, just like we had at the beginning of the Islamic Republic. We had this guy Bakhtiar basically becoming the leader for a very short time, and then
Mhm.
eventually that collapsed and the Islamic Republic came into power. I think for us that's going to be the same thing. Like if Rouhani and if we have a government ruled by Rouhani and Zarif, it would be just a surrender phase. They will be the people who would just basically surrender to the Americans, and after that the Iranian people will topple them very easily. That's what I think will happen if we get to
Okay.
that point.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Good question, by the way.